Thank you for tuning in to the MOA podcast, where a group of SRNAs break down the mechanics of anesthesia science, education, and beyond.
Welcome to our last episode of this three-part series on transitioning from RN to SRNA. So far we've covered preparing friends and family, preparing your finances, and lastly, we'll be talking about how to prepare for the workload of CRNA school. So many times, I'm sure all of us have been asked, how do I prepare for school? What can I study? I think we've all felt this, and the short answer is you'll never be able to study everything or remember everything. It's just too much. Remember, you're about to start a rigorous 3-year journey where you're going to be given new information like you're drinking from a fire hose. That being said, here are some academic and non-academic ways that we found to be helpful in the preparation for CRNA school. So, Eric, if you could, can you highlight some of the academic strategies you've come across?
Yeah, thanks for that, Dylan. We've discussed in previous episodes ad nauseum the importance of understanding the why for your interventions, for your patient pathophysiology, your pharmacology. I would say continue to build on that the best that you can. I think that, once people get accepted, it's like, oh gosh, like it becomes a reality that it's happening and you try to think of everything that you don't know, but give yourself credit. You've gotten to this point and you should have a good understanding of your ICU nursing and the pertinent pathophys and pharmacology to that. I think that if you were to review any areas, some areas to focus on are the cardiac and respiratory physiology, often overlooked because many people want to focus on the patho, but in order to understand the patho in depth, you also need to understand the physiology as well. I would say cardiac pharmacology is very important, especially if you don't come from a cardiac background. Being familiar with your vasopressors, with your inotropes, with your vasodilators, all of the autonomic medications, and especially the autonomic nervous system physiology is extremely important because that's just going to build on once you start school and it's going to get more in depth from there. You should also be familiar with the induction meds, especially ones that you give for RSI, and then the neuromuscular blockers as well that you give for RSI. There's plenty of more to come on that when you go into school, but being familiar with those, you will learn everything you need to know about these medications while you're in school. Be familiar with the mechanism of action for those drugs and their side effects as well. If it's been a while since you were in a structured learning environment, I think it's important to begin to structure your day like you are going to be in school. Yeah, this is difficult when you're working full time, and especially if you're on night shift, that schedule is brutal in and of itself. But dedicating some time on your days off to, okay, I'm gonna read for X number of hours this day, or I'm gonna watch YouTube videos. I'm gonna watch Ninja Nerd is a great reference for a lot of the physiology and pathophysiology. So if you can start doing that stuff and dedicate time early on, you'll find that that transition when things start and you hit the ground running in CRNA school very quickly, you'll find that that transition is a little bit easier. And really it's just the discipline in terms of your time is extremely important. And that's, I think, what I'm getting at is the academic side. You know more than what you give yourself credit for, but definitely begin to become academically disciplined and prepare yourself for what is to come in terms of your workload schedule when you start school. Dylan, in terms of the bedside RN, what were some things that you did or that you recommend one doing without necessarily overstressing about the anesthesia content?
To make sure you're not going to overstress yourself about anesthesia content, there's a lot to it, so it's hard to dive into, especially if you don't have a baseline. So I think to as like a new R or as an RN, like getting ready to start at CRNA school, the best thing you can do is like to continue to be inquisitive on the unit, talk with your physicians, try to understand the normal physiology. learn about some of the pathophysiology of like certain lung diseases that you see, try to understand how your ventilator is working. Just very like basic things that are taught like through CCRN or like the CMC exams. Like those are great areas to start, especially with like medications. Like you'll do a whole deep dive on medications once you get into pharmacology, and it's much more than you look at as a registered nurse. So it's important just to like have that baseline information. Many people will be surprised at this, but continue to work on your bedside manner. Prior to putting someone to sleep, you're gonna have to do a pre-op interview, and you only get 10 to 15 minutes where you get to learn as much about this patient, as well as you have to gain their trust, get consent, and also allow them to let you put them to sleep while they're going to be their most vulnerable state.
Dr. Callio in our second episode made a really good point in that episode about how he looks for an applicant. He wants someone that can go into a patient's room, have an extroverted conversation with that patient, and gain their trust for anesthesia. That is so important because if a patient's anxious before surgery, they're going to be anxious after. They're going to wake up with delirium. They're going to wake up with uncontrolled pain. So that preoperative interview is so important. And there's more to come on that, but I just wanted to make note of that and make note of Dr. Callio's point in terms of the pre-op interview, especially given that he's a subject matter expert with that.
Eric, what are some other tips you have before starting school?
I think that once you're accepted, it's very important to give yourself time to relax. We talked about it earlier. Everyone wants to learn as much as they can in a 6 month period or even longer if you're in a delayed start program. But I would say that you have to dedicate some time to really just relax and reset because the next 3 years are going to be so busy and challenging and stressful that just take a vacation, spend some time on hobbies, but also start to recognize like some hobbies that bring you a lot of happiness and bring you a lot of stress relief because you want to utilize those when you start school as well. And then be intentional about spending time with family. We alluded to that in the first episode of this series, is that really just take the time to spend time with your family and prepare them for the journey that you're about to make into CRNA school. I also have found a number of books to be helpful. We actually were recommended to read a book called Make It Stick, and it's about study strategies and how you can go about forming concrete and like long-term memory with things and what are the most beneficial study strategies for that. I thought that book was excellent. I got it as an audiobook and listened to it. Took me a couple days, but just an excellent resource, especially for those that are not like really sure how they should go about starting school and then also studying in school. So you find what works for you. But this book is an excellent resource. Dylan, what about you? What are some books that you like to read in terms of the CRNA school preparation?
I do have to agree with you. Without reading Make It Sick, I would be lying if I ever said I actually knew how to study prior to this program. I feel like this program has taught me how to study. Before, I've kind of always just made my way through, so definitely a great resource to learn how to study. A book we previously talked about with Dr. Callia, which I think is a great book, is Grit by Angela Duckworth. It's a great read. It teaches you about what grit is and understanding what you're going to have to develop for the next 3 years to make it through this program. Definitely, probably one of my favorite books I've read because it really shows you that like it's not something that can just be like you can't just be like, oh, I'm the smartest person and make it through. It's going to take determination, and it's the saying it's not a sprint, it's a marathon is so true with this program. Like each week you struggle to make it through the next set of content, but you just have to keep moving forward. Otherwise, you're gonna fall way far too behind.
Absolutely. Ben, what about you? What are some of the recommendations that you have for someone that's accepted into school or looking to be accepted and they're trying to prepare for CRNA school?
I've had a couple people reach out to me about kind of my process and what I did. And pretty much I kind of reiterate the same thing is it's super important to get your mental right. Burnout is so real in this program. And I feel like we've all experienced that multiple times throughout this program. And just how you deal with stress and how you deal with negative news is it's really going to make the difference between someone who can be successful in this program and someone who may struggle. So if there's anything if you're that you're dealing with beforehand, just making I can't emphasize enough how important it is to make sure that mentally you're able to respond to stress well. So and that's why I kind of have a couple of tips here that I'm going to talk about. But first thing I do want to mention too is depending on what program you're at, I'm sure almost all of them, you can reach out to your program faculty, see if there's anything you can do to prepare. But they'll let you know when they're give you the resources while you're in school of anything you need to be successful. Another thing that I've found very helpful for me, again, this is just something that they've done a lot of studies on. I've done quite a bit of research on myself is meditation. If you come from a religious background at all, I've been told by a lot of people that prayer sometimes helps out a lot of people as well in terms of calming them down. So it's also super important. I used to not even really believe this until I started this program, but like how important like diet and exercise are to maintaining your sanity. I'm sure Eric and Dylan can both attest to this. Well, maybe Eric, not Dylan because it doesn't work out, but working out is essential for maintaining your sanity. So going on runs and taking that 1 day, 1 hour break just gets your mindset and you get that nice endorphins boost and really in the mindset to study again. Eating properly is definitely an important part, and I wasn't able to emphasize that as much, but keeping your glucose levels needed in your brain to like keep going because when you're hungry and tired, you really aren't studying properly and you're not getting as much as you totally could be. And whatever you do, make sure you take some time with stress management and implement those strategies throughout your week because the better you can get your mental state, the easier it is to study, and you're not constantly fighting against your brain. So those are some things that have really helped me, and I'd love to hear what you guys have had to say about that stuff too, if you have anything to add right now.
Yeah, I'll add to that. One thing I know that like we've kind of implemented a lot of is like, I mean, me and Ben will play ping pong all the time. So I'm here on campus most times studying with him. So we'll play a lot of ping pong, just like a 10, 20 minute mental break, is always nice. And then also like additionally, we always play pickleball. Just another way to like get outside and like get some like it's hard to find time to get away from the books. So making sure you can take like a minute, like once you're in school, whether it's at night or like in the day, like going and playing pickleball is nice. Just be outside and like breathing fresh air. I mean, it's rough when we sit in the classroom for 12 hours. You get mentally exhausted.
That's one of the things I look forward to the most is playing pickleball with you guys. As much as Ben irritates me when we do play, I do really enjoy it. And like you said, it's great exercise, but it's just that area of relief. I don't think that you get much out of it once your like brain is toasted and you're just over it. You do need to take a break, and the importance of taking breaks and allowing yourself to reset is super important to your memory and to your studying as well. To transition off of these aspects into a concept that is pretty pertinent to our profession and our life as students is imposter syndrome. And we wanted to take a little bit of time in this episode to talk about that because it's something that you hear a lot about and you might not know exactly what it is, but it's something that many SRNAs and people that get accepted into school and are in school, they may struggle with. So, Ben, why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about imposter syndrome?
For sure. Thanks, Eric. And then by the way, I think I might frustrate you in pickleball because you're not very good, but if you get better, it becomes so much more fun.
That's all right.
Anyways,
We can fight. We can fight. It's fine.
on a more serious note, with imposter syndrome, I think almost definitely all three of us, but most CRNAs or SRNA in any program are going to start to feel the effects of imposter syndrome. I know, I mean, you constantly hear from people saying that, like, you were top dog in your ICU or your nursing program, and now CRNA school is basically a room filled with that. For me, I don't know. I've just honestly never felt like top dog in even any of those programs. I'm more of a survive and advance dog, but I'm still here. So I definitely understand the imposter syndrome associated with that. I remember hearing that negative self-talk, regardless, is going to be really harmful, only cause you more stress. If you keep calling yourself that, you have one bad test day, you're going to constantly tell yourself, well, it's because I don't belong here. That's just not healthy for anyone. You remind yourself that you do belong here. You can do something as little as even placing a post-it note in your laptop or a reminder to give you a positive message. So I couldn't I really do think negative self-talk it's really harmful and it really doesn't help anyone. So just be positive.
I also struggled with imposter syndrome and just kind of, on your bad days, you tend to be like, well, am I going to be good enough to enter this specialty? This specialty is so vast and it's so complicated that I think you just kind of have that thought in the back of your mind as to whether or not you can do this. And one of our professors, and I distinctively remember this, he said that he asked, someone had mentioned something about imposter syndrome, and he was like, okay, who here thinks in this room thinks that they have imposter syndrome? And I know I raised my hand. I sit towards the front of the class, so I couldn't really see who was behind me, but I know that several people raised their hands. And he said something that has really stuck with me since then. And it was something along the lines of, you know, I don't know why anyone here thinks that they have imposter syndrome. You are here for a reason. There were 500, 600 other people, other applicants that applied to be in your seat. Not only did you get into the program, but you've also gotten to this point in the program successfully. Do not let yourself think that you can't do this. And just reiterates what Ben said about negative self-talk is devastating to your confidence and your ability to be successful. So remind yourself of that in the bad times, but also remind yourself of that maybe when you want to start complaining about things or you want to start feeling bad for yourself that you're in CRNA school, is that yes, there is 600, even more people that applied to be in your position and would most likely give up everything that they have to be in your position. So it goes both ways, and remind yourself of that during the good and bad moments. Ben, we talked about the growth mindset in previous episodes. What do you think about that in terms of how it pertains to imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we're still all working on. And honestly, even as a CRNA, I can't imagine myself not working on a growth mindset for the rest of your life. I mean, that's just something about trying to get better every day. There's just always going to be an incentive and something else you can do. So that's something we're obviously all working on. Your attitude again with school is going to carry you a long way. So like I said, there's going to be times where you have burnout where you're thinking to yourself, like, "Ugh, I have to wake up and study these lectures again. I have to wake up and go to clinical again." But at the end of the day, you chose to be here. So if you want to have that mindset that you're dreading this every day, yeah, these 3 years are going to be terrible for you. But if you have this mindset, like, look, there's so many other people who wanted to be here and I'm here, like, I'm blessed. So just it really does make it a lot easier. And I know it's easier said than done, but like even just talking this out, it just really helps me to be able to understand that too. So if you're not just be okay at first too if not being successful at something. I know all of us at some point with our initial intubation techniques, we definitely could have had some improvements, but we all get better every time. And just seeing us, all three of us, grow in the last 9 months has been something that I'm really proud of for all three of us.
You just have to be okay with being unsuccessful and failing at something. I think that there's such a negative connotation. Oh, I failed this. And yes, there's probably better ways to say that, but I think you have to be okay with not being good at something the first time you try it. You're going to miss an art line stick. You're going to miss an intubation. You're going to miss an IV. You have to be okay with that. And it goes back to being resilient and having the grit and determination to be successful no matter what obstacles come in your way. So thank you, Ben, for talking about that growth mindset and for talking about the importance of, your attitude carrying you through school and your attitude towards a positive mindset. Dylan, what do you have in terms of your understanding and what you've seen with regards to imposter syndrome and really the transition to CRNA school?
Yeah, for sure. I think imposter syndrome was definitely something that like I didn't think I was going to experience in the beginning, but it came very fast. It hit immediately. And even I feel like even at times like now, you still get those moments like before certain tests, you always question yourself, but just I think the big thing is like you said, just kind of keep pushing on and remind yourself that you're here for a reason, and like that kind of helps like get rid of that imposter syndrome as it's kind of setting on. But one thing, one thing that I've kind of like built as my mantra, like when I feel overwhelmed or like wishing I was doing something different, is I like to remind myself that going to school is a choice, and no one forced me to be here. So there are 100 other applicants that wanted to be here and would give everything to be in your spot. So knowing that, I'm gonna make sure I put in the time. And I mean that just comes down to again grit, just making sure you're gonna put in the time to be successful. There's nothing that can really stop you in this program.
It goes along with having your why do you want to become a CRNA? And it's the importance of having that individual specific want and why for why you want to become a CRNA, because it's not going to be easy. There's going to be times when you do fail and that you will need to have a positive mindset. But in the end, I think we have done a great job at shedding some light into the transition from RN to sRNA, and then kind of what our lives have been like a little bit the last, year and a half. So we're just about to take our C exam, and I think we're really just preparing for that, but also recognize that we all three and much of our cohort has worked very hard the last 18 months to prepare for this exam. And we take it before we enter clinical just as a general benchmark to see where we stand after the completion of our didactic training, because we are a front loaded program. So more to come on that. Hopefully, some episodes after the transitioning from RN to sRNA, we can talk about our experiences with that. And without further ado, just thank you all for listening. Thank you for supporting our podcast, and just continue to work hard, continue to have a positive mindset. And we can't wait to see where that brings you into your CRNA school journey. So thank you, and we will talk soon.